Good afternoon or evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world, folks. Welcome to another episode of Show and Tell with Generative AI here at AWS. Today, we're going to be talking about a subject that I know if you're tuned in right now, you want to know all about, and that is model context protocol. But before we do that, folks, I'm Trevor Spires. I'm a solutions architect here at AWS. I'm joined by two other lovely solutions architects. I'm coming in from Salem, Massachusetts, by the way. If you're tuned in the chat, let us know where in the world are you coming in from. Um, these other two amazing essays. Tell the people who you are, why we're here.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Trevor. I'm Anil Nadiminti. I'm another solutions architect, a senior solutions architect here at AWS. I'm joining from Princeton, New Jersey today. The weather is changing every day, right? Yesterday it was in the morning it was like 60, and in the evening it went high 80s. Today is a different day altogether again. But yeah, excited to know where you folks are joining from. Today we have an exciting episode, and we'll chat more about that. But
Oh,
I'll
and
let
we're
Adam.
joined in the chat by the ultra rare
Oh,
Darko, the
God.
man himself in the chat. Hopefully coming in from Seattle or wherever Darkos hang out on Tuesdays. Adam, all you, man. Tell the folks who you are and tell them what you're going to tell them about today.
Oh yeah, so my name is Adam Bloom. I'm also a solutions architect out of St. Louis, Missouri, and we just had our first tornado hit our neighborhood a couple of weeks ago, getting a new roof. Luckily, no one was hurt, but pretty crazy times. But I am super
Wow.
excited to be here to talk to you all about model context protocol, specifically on AWS. Super exciting technology.
And Adam's got some awesome demos for us today. But I think we're going to start just kind of figuring out what the heck is model context protocol at a very high level. But
Is
uh,
that the hottest thing out there right
it
now?
is the hottest thing right now for
So
sure.
hot, so
It's
hot.
certified the hottest thing. Like
Yeah.
you can't open LinkedIn or Twitter without hearing about MCP. Here, like learning about MCP. I was trying to figure out what it was until Adam sat me down a couple of days ago and was like, "Yo, it's not that complicated. It's a client server architecture, makes things a lot easier." And I think in fact maybe we should talk like why is it getting so much traction all of a sudden in the last couple of days?
Well, yeah, I think the reason why it's getting so much traction is because this is just something that Anthropic came out with a few months ago, or 4 or 5 months ago. I believe it was November of last year, and it was a little kind of quiet release. But there's been some stuff at some conferences, some great presentations around it, and then some big announcements on supportability of MCP by the industry, such as OpenAI, Microsoft. AWS is one of the first to support this with Anthropic in different ways. And so, the industry continues to wrap its arms around the MCP protocol as a standard for agentic workflows. So I think, it's just picking up steam as more and more organizations, more and more companies adopt it as a standard.
My joke of the week has been, hey, all you have to do is call your SDK a protocol, and then everybody's all excited about it. It reminds me of my days as a network engineer.
Is that
Uh,
what's happening here?
I don't think that's what's happening. I think it's actually just a really good protocol and SDK or set of SDKs. But
Yeah.
but I mean, the momentum has been virtually every major player has been advocating for this over the last few days.
It's pretty wild. I mean, there's a bunch of public MCP servers out there. You can create your own MCP servers. And what that means is that you can leverage your AI to talk to these MCP servers and just do a bunch of amazing things like, use web browsing, use different tools, access databases, all sorts of incredible things, just using natural language. And so the MCP, we can get into that if you want. We can get into kind of what it is.
Let's get into it. There's so many applications for MCP. Darko's in the chat. I saw his demo earlier today. In fact, MCP already supported in some Q developer features, which is very cool. But yeah, let's there's what's MCP. It is one of those technologies that's going to be applied everywhere and kind of abstracted away from most people. But this is fundamentally a developer technology today, right? So let's talk about
Well, you're right. It is a developer technology, but I think there's two sides of this coin, right? The first side is definitely the developer, right? Because it allows the developer to access data sources in a very agentic, very standardized way. And that's crucial, right? But the other side of this is the data owner. So if you think like, oh, we're in AWS, we have a bunch of databases or S3 buckets or, whatever it may be, you could create an MCP server for your data source and provide a standardized, structured way to allow your developers within your organization to access that data in a standardized, streamlined way for agentic workflows. So it's a really awesome way to empower the data owners to break down those data silos, as well as empower the developers to be able to build these agentic capabilities much faster.
So I guess walk us through, right? Like we're looking at this architecture here. Like give people a high level overview, like how does MCP work? I think I've heard it described as a USB-C port for large language models, right? Which makes me think it's like an easy way to connect data into LLMs. But what's happening behind the scenes behind that analogy here?
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy. Anthropic, coined that, and I like to think of it as like the API for the API. It's like what REST API did for that standardization. This is going to do for large language model for generative AI, and so it's a client-server protocol. So your client being your application, your server being the MCP server that provides that access to your data source. And your data source could be a database, like I said, an S3 bucket. It could be a GitLab repository. It could be a website. It could be even your local file system. It's pretty incredible what you can enable with this client server architecture. And so you have different protocols to connect the client to the server. But it enables, allows the LLM in your application to understand, what's available in the MCP server in terms of prompts that are specific to your data source, tools that are specific to your data source, and other capabilities as well. So you can package that all up in an MCP server. And then when your application connects to that server, your AI, your LLM will be able to understand that just automatically and know what to do. So if you ask a simple or complex question in your AI application and it's connected to an MCP server, as we'll see in the demo, your AI is going to know, okay, what tool should I use? When should I use it? How should I use it? And it's going to know how to interpret that data and make use of it. So it's really powerful. But just some other information, Anthropic made some, model context protocol, made it open source. So it's an open standard, and it's model agnostic as well. So it doesn't just have to be with Claude. It can work with many, many different models. And there's some SDKs to develop capabilities off of it. And it's fastly improving. There's been some new announcements that we can get into in a little bit. But yeah, simply said, as it says there in point 5, it standardizes AI workflows, across your cloud, across your enterprise.
And I want to ask the chat here, right? So all the viewers out there, let us know if you're already dabbling into MCPs, creating MCP servers or using the MCP, clients to access existing servers out there. Let us know what servers you're using, and share more with us.
One thing that I want, like when I look at something like this, I also wonder, like, especially when there's this idea of creating a server in an enterprise setting or like in a setting where you're building maybe many different AI applications that need access to the same data set. I guess, is there some benefit in terms of like, not like right now, if you're building an agent and you need that agent to call DynamoDB, and then you build another agent that needs to call DynamoDB, you have to keep rebuilding that DynamoDB integration kind of over and over again with that agent to pull data into your context. This seems like a way to potentially set up the access to the data like one time in a centralized way that maybe multiple apps could get access through this service.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like that's a really good point. I mean, that's one of the pain points of building agentic workflows today, right? I mean, LangChain, LangGraph, they're all awesome. But one of the big pain points is like, if I'm an AI developer, you're an AI developer, we have two different applications, but we both want to access the same data source, maybe in our enterprise and in our cloud. You and I, especially if we're working on different teams, we're going to have to reinvent the wheel uniquely, and that's that's not scalable. That's not a standardized way to do that. And so MCP solves that problem in a big way. And it also I like to think of this too as like DevOps, right? Like how DevOps kind of help you break down those IT silos. MCP is going to help break down those data silos as well to give your AI access. And by the way, RAG is retrieval augmented generation. That's still important, right? And Bedrock agents, LangChain, LangGraph, those are still all important. MCP does not necessarily get rid of those things. It's just MCP is a way to standardize your agentic workflows. It's a big game changer, obviously.
And on the server side, right? So when you're building these MCPs and you're creating those integrations, is that like an SDK that you're using to build these integrations?
Yeah.
How do you get to that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a SDK that's provided by Anthropic. There's some resources too that we'll definitely share from Anthropic around the SDK, and with some examples on how to build your MCP servers and your MCP client if you need to build a client. By the way, just on the client side, there's a number of different clients as we'll get into, such as Klein and some other clients like Claude for desktop that allow you to connect, because your client has to know how to connect to those servers.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you have that client, you can then connect to that server pretty easily. Mm-hmm. On the MCP server side, you'd use that SDK to create that.
So I suspect we're going to see, since this is a protocol, like I suspect we're going to see a lot of different SDKs, a lot of different client SDKs, a lot of different server SDKs that like support the MCP.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
And what would it look like without MCP in place, right? So
yeah. So we can get into that actually.
Yeah, I think that would be. Let's come back to this in a sec. I think the before MCP piece. Let's skip to that, because people might be familiar with that without MCP option, where they're building some agents, but kind of walk people through the I guess the pain or the challenges that might come building without MCP.
Yeah, so I like this little diagram here, this picture here, because what you see on the left side is without and the right side is with. And it may seem very similar at first glance, but if you actually look inside the application, in the picture on the left side, it says code for application 1, application 2, application N. In other words, you have to reinvent the wheel. You have to create custom code integrations for each data source that you want your AI, your agentic workflow to access. I have an example of that. I built an agentic workflow to connect to some AWS data sources using LangChain, and it works, but it was a kind of a painful process because there was no standardized way. I couldn't just connect to it, right? I had to figure out, okay, what are the APIs? What is, how do you format the data? All these kind of different things, the syntax, and work with Lambda and all this kind of stuff. And, it worked, but, if somebody else had to repeat that kind of workflow, they'd have to figure it out on their own too, unless I had really good documentation and shared my code with them. And so on the right side, that's where, of course, MCP comes in. If I am a data owner and I create an MCP server, then it doesn't matter if 1 or 100 different developers want to, access my data with agentic capabilities. The AI is going to know how to access that data and make use of it. And so it really simplifies your application as it does on the right side with MCP, because you don't have to write all those custom integrations every time for your agentic application. So that's kind of like the difference there with and without MCP. It's definitely simplifies the development process and speeds it up. And that's another.
Yeah,
that's a really
because if we break down the MCP, like model context protocol, like most people or many people are probably familiar with the idea of like a context window.
Yeah.
In some LLM, and so that's how I like I think of like basically every RAG or agentic application, like almost everything that you do, almost all of the software that you write in the context of generative AI is about how do I get the right data into the context window of my model so that way it says the right thing, or it performs this task with a certain level of accuracy. And so the fact that this, like, I'm excited to learn more, because I a part of me wonders, like, okay, so like once you have your client server infrastructure in place, is it from the developer experience, does it just seem like you're sending prompts into the model and it just kind of automatically like is able MCP is orchestrating what systems to pull into the context window? Like, I'm excited to learn more about that context window orchestration and how that plays within the MCP protocol.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have your MCP, well, we could see this in the demo too. If you have an MCP client, you define your MCP servers via JSON, and you connect to you. That has your connection information, and you'll want to save your, of course.
Plus, it's like a config file type thing.
It's like a config file. Absolutely, it's a config file. Yeah, and so it's a config file on the client side with your MCP servers, one to many.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and that, and actually it scales really well. There's been people using 40, 50 MCP servers in one go, which is pretty wild.
Wow.
Yeah. So you can imagine the power and capabilities that would give your application. And I really, just to summarize, right, like just being a standardized protocol, right, it kind of just replaces the fragmented, custom agentic, custom integrations that you have to build typically with agentic workflows. So it's definitely a game changer for sure on the AI development side. And I'm just like personally super excited. I'm seeing some of my customers starting to use this in their workflows with their data sources, and it's already speeding up. They're already getting a return on their investment using MCP. Return on investment being, kind of the small learning curve there. Just to learn it and implement it. So really, really exciting. They're moving faster.
And once you set it up, right, so the agentic architectures can come in and then the agents can pick it up right away, like, deciphering what is the request that is coming in and making sure that they are able to do the tool calling and including calling the MCPs here and ensuring that it's able to format the request and send it to the backend, right? So a lot of action, I guess, we're going to see in our demo today.
Yeah, absolutely. And the protocol uses something called JSON RPC 2.0, and there's different kind of transport layers. There's HTTP and standard IO communication protocols that you can use for transport. All that to mean is that it's a standardized way for the data to be structured and your AI models to understand it, your LLMs. So we can definitely go to the next slide or.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, I mean, like, was there anything else you feel like we need to cover, Adam, before we jump into the demo architecture?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we could just go back a slide, I can just show you what does it look like inside of a MCP server. So I like this example because kind of just holistically shows like the client server. Like, okay, you have your client on the left, and so you have your weather agent. In this case, it's a weather application. You have your weather agent, and on the right side, you have your MCP server. And so you can see inside the MCP server, we can have different tools, and tools can be like function calls, right? So for example, let's say you have like the Amazon location service, and you have your maps or locations or your different API capabilities. Those can be tools for within your MCP server that the LLM can make use of. Or their weather resources. And then there's also be prompts. So like, let's say you have specific data that's very niche to your use case. You can have prompts in your MCP server that work really well with your data, that once your LLM on the client side connects to that MCP server, can make use of those special prompts to get the most out of that data source. That's really powerful. And that's a really scalable way to get the most accuracy out of whatever data source your LLM's getting out of. That way you don't have to like, I need to connect to like 15 different data sources as an AI developer. You don't want to have to figure out, what's the schema, how, you don't have to prompt engineer every single data source yourself, right? You want the data owner who understands that data to kind of come up with those best prompts for their data. Right. And then you can just make use of that.
But so I have a question. So like behind like the weather, MCP server, like when the client initiates whatever connection or request it sends to the MCP server, is it actually calling an LLM then to construct some query out of that? Because or maybe it could be all the above. Maybe it could be a static function as well. I'm just kind of curious what's happening inside the server itself.
Yeah,
from an AI perspective.
So that's what's really interesting. You bring up a really good point. So most MCP servers today do not have another LLM in them, right? Your LLM on the client application side calls that MCP server. The MCP server has the protocol, the way to kind of communicate to that data source and then standardize it. But it's actually possible to embed a LLM or have an LLM on the MCP server side as well. According to Anthropic, there was an awesome presentation Anthropic did for AI engineer, and they kind of went a little deep on the idea of kind of like Inception, like having an LLM in each MCP server, and how powerful that could be too. So you could do both. You could do either or.
Yeah, and by the way, we have a question from somebody in the chat that's interesting. Like, they ask, is there a data standard basically for MCP? My guess is the data standard is kind of the protocol itself and how messaging is being passed from the client to the server. But it seems it sounds so far like it's pretty extensible. Like, basically the idea is that you could integrate with any data standard, from structured data to unstructured data. Like, pretty much anything you could write in code, it seems like you could integrate with MCP.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a really good point. So as far as the data itself, like to Trevor's point, structured, unstructured, semi-structured does not matter, because that's, the MCP standardizes the transport layer of the protocol. So that way the LLM knows how to interpret that data and make sense of it. And so when, you look at this weather app, for example, this weather server, rather, their tools and resources, those tools and resources are programmed right in the MCP server when you build that, to know how to work with that specific data type. But because of the protocol will translate that into that standard that the client understands. And so that way, whatever MCP server that client connects to, whatever kind of data it is or condition that data is in, because it's a standardized protocol, it's going to know how to work with it. So you're not going to have to do any special data transformations necessarily for MCP to work.
So what are some examples of MCP servers or use cases where MCP servers can be used, right? I know this is like asking, hey, can you give me an example of where the SDK can be used, right? So
what's a use case for AWS?
Like that.
Right. Yeah, I can't wait to show you that. Like, there's so many use cases for AWS, right? As we can imagine, because you could put an MCP server in front of pretty much any AWS service, because you can create custom AWS MCP servers for AWS services, as I will show you in the demo. But like, one use case that I have, right, is like I created one for Amazon location service, really accurate, capability there to get longitude, latitude, get information about locations, the businesses, stuff like that, map data from Esri or other map providers, geospatial capabilities. And then if you combine that with another MCP server, let's say from, the ability to browse the web, or the ability to, look at a database, you can imagine the kind of use cases you can build with these MCP servers. And that's kind of what I have. I'm super excited to demo that for you too.
Can't wait.
Yeah, maybe you should go ahead and show us like what the demo architecture, because I think that might be a nice way to pull together a lot of these different concepts we're talking about here. Walk folks through what you built for them and what we're about to take a look at.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's different ways you could architect an MCP client server, right? Like, one way I would imagine, maybe you have Amazon Bedrock as a client, or you have Amazon Q as a client, and then you have your MCP servers that are AWS services, or maybe they're just your own data sources or some third-party, MCP server. That works as an architecture, of course, too. In this case, I'm simulating what would it be like if I'm a developer, and I want to make use of these really powerful AWS services for an agentic workflow. And so on the left side, I have my local machine, and I have Visual Studio Code, and I have Klein. Klein is an open source plugin for Visual Studio Code. And what's really powerful about Klein as an open source plugin is that it natively works with MCP. So it acts as an MCP client, which is really important to be able to connect to MCP servers.
Mhm.
And then I created some MCP. I created 2 out of the 3 MCP servers here, and these are just TypeScript files that are on my local machine. And one's the Amazon Location Services, one's DynamoDB. The other is knowledge bases from Bedrock. And that one is an official MCP server from AWS. But all 3 of these allow me to connect to my services in my AWS account. And you could think of this in different ways too. So as far as like how powerful do you want your MCP servers to be? So for example, I pre-created the Amazon Location Services and my DynamoDB table. And I also have a graph rag built in Amazon Bedrock knowledge bases. And that way, of course, my application, in this case, it's going to be Klein, can make use of those specific resources within those services. Technically, it could be possible where you could have, an MCP server that enables your MCP client application to even create a net new database and populate that database, right? Depending on, some input you get, as opposed to just, doing CRUD on a existing database, right? Create, read, write, stuff like that. And so,
hey, I got one thing that it came in through the chat, and we talked about it before, but I want to spend a little more time on it because this was selfishly, this was the question on my mind when I started learning about this, was like, kind of how is this different from like basically a tool use or function calling, right? Because, of course, as I look at this diagram, any of these MCP servers, Dynamo, location service, technically, I could do any of that through a function call. So, and I think a lot of folks that have been playing with AI are familiar with that concept of a function call. Maybe on Bedrock, they're using our tool use API. Why? I think it's good to reiterate for folks, like when should we be thinking about this pattern versus function calling? For me, it seems like it's about reusability, but maybe there's more to the story than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about reusability, like scalability, control, because, if you think about it, like most organizations, if they're in, any one of these services, if they're making use of DynamoDB or RDS, for example, they're going to have existing databases probably for some specific use case. They're going to want to control access patterns. MCP servers are compatible with OAuth 2.
Right. So you could actually like insert your security and authentication controls on the MCP server as an idea, but then I think the big thing, and for me, Korik in the chat, the big thing for me is like, I work with enterprise clients, and like they don't want, like, if they have 10 agents, they're going to have 10 of the same function calls configured for each agent. There's all this variability, like they might even build some complex system of like the standard tool library for agents, where this is now an open standard to simplify all of that and make it such that like an enterprise client, like if I want my AI applications to have access to data in DynamoDB, I just spin up that MCP server, and that's the only way that AI application is going to get access to DynamoDB if that's the security kind of policy I want. That central just there's so much value, I think, in the central access and reusability. And then now my brain's firing as soon as you said OAuth, Adam, because I'm thinking of all of the additional services that can be inserted into an MCP server to give you things like advanced logging and access patterns of the AI models to the data in your infrastructure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like that is so important. Really, I just go back to the DevOps analogy a little bit, right? Like we don't want shadow IT, we don't want shadow AI, and not that just function calling is shadow AI necessarily, but you want to have better scale and control, in an enterprise environment. And MCP gives that control to the data owner to a large degree, right? Because they can integrate with OAuth capabilities. They can control what tools, what resources are available, what prompts are available in their own MCP server that's available to developers in their organization. And, that's huge.
And to add to what Adam just mentioned, right? So think of MCPs where you can, let's say there's an MCP for a database, right? So, and you could ask an MCP, what is the schema, get the schema back, and then make another call requesting, hey, can you give me data that's based on this particular filter, right? So MCP will do all the translation for you and get the data back for you, right? So think of it as an extension of a tool that is available for you.
Yeah, and so we talked a little bit about the data owner side, right? Just going back to the developer side, to your point, Anil, is that it just makes it so much easier on you as a developer because, again, do you want to have to learn and try to be an expert on that data source? Again, what's the schema? What's the way to function call this?
Oh my God, it's so true. It's so true. I've got AI engineers slacking me about like a SQL, like a text to SQL prompt, and it's not about making the AI model work. They're trying to figure out how SQL works. It's
that's a great point. Like, and then why? Just like we always talk about, as far as like natural language processing with large language models. Why should a business user ever have to learn a complicated syntax or learn SQL to get business value out of their data? Why should an AI developer have to learn data sources to build a specific use case if they're not owners of that data?
And that's when humans are talking, right? But now when machines are talking and agents are performing operations on behalf of machines, I can't say this, operations on behalf of humans, the agents will need to know what is the schema, how they need to invoke the database, and make all the executions out there, right? So machines would want to know real time the details of the database in this particular example.
Well, that's a great call. Wow, like I love that we have the show because this topic is so rich, and I think a big reason it's getting this protocol is getting so much traction is because there's so much potential. But you kind of nailed it, Neil. Like the agent piece, like today theoretically, if you wanted to tell an agent to like start automating itself, like you would have to write. You could theoretically think of a system that's like writing its own function calls, and that gets really messy really quickly. Where this kind of opens the door for an agent with some structured, set of rules of what it can have access to I think more easily interact with data across systems.
So I can't really wait to see the demo here. Like
we've got to get to it.
Definitely. If I may just explain a little more about, was it the question? What doesn't?
I think the question is, why aren't we launching our own MCP servers? And guess what? We are today. We just announced a bunch of supported MCP servers on AWS. It's a combo of like open source servers that we're launching and some native servers that we're hosting within Bedrock. But like, I expect many more. Updates in the space to follow.
Oh, 100%. And, in fact, my demo actually leverages one of those AWS MCP servers in Bedrock knowledge bases. I didn't create that one. AWS did. So I get to leverage that and benefit from the MCP server that they built. So I just have to provide my, knowledge base, my Bedrock knowledge base ID, my AWS credentials, and I'm off to the races in querying my database. And what that is I'm using, just a Neptune Analytics GraphRag database with a bunch of data in it for my use case. It's super awesome. And there's going to be way more MCP servers being built for sure.
Cool. All right.
Yeah. And we can get into the demo if you want.
Yeah. I want to see some invoking some Amazon location services, some Dynamo. I want to see that native thing. I want to see what this looks like in action.
Yeah. So just to walk you guys through this. So this is my Visual Studio Code environment. And what I have here is my example MCP client settings here. So again, client is an open source plugin for Visual Studio Code. It has native MCP client capabilities. Again, just to reiterate, you could create your own MCP clients, just like you can create your own MCP servers. But it's just a really convenient way for myself to build proof of concepts and experiment using Klein. And I'm able to use Amazon Bedrock or use Anthropic models. All sorts of different capabilities here with Klein. And just to walk you through before I start prompting the model. Just to walk you through like this client MCP settings.json. This is an example of what the config file that you mentioned earlier, Trevor, looks like for your MCP servers on the client side. And so I have this like MCP server, one for GitHub. I have one for DynamoDB, for example, and you can see the arguments, and it has a path to the to the MCP server for DynamoDB that I created here. You wouldn't want to store your environment variables here. You would want to have that as a separate .env file. But just wanted to have this as an example. For this, I have like auto approve capabilities too. So that's one other thing too you have with Klein and some MCP client capabilities is to auto approve your agentic use of MCP resources and tool use. And I have that here as an example. There's some variables. It depends on your MCP server. Like, for example, this one has the ability to set a timeout. Some other MCP servers. Here's my Amazon location MCP server. And you can see that I have it connected to, again, the MCP server, which is running locally in this case. But in AWS, you could deploy that, say, in ECS or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. And then you have different capabilities here. This is not an exhaustive list.
It's a new managed service idea. What are we gonna call the AWS managed service that allows you to deploy serverless MCPs on AWS?
Well, wait,
MCP.
Yeah.
I don't know what we'll call it, but I know that earlier Adam said
Nova MCP.
Nova MCP. There we go. That's what we need. Maybe it's just another feature of Bedrock. It's just another tab on the left-hand side of the Bedrock console. Set up your managed MCP server. That actually seems like a logical place to put something like that.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, it's funny you actually mentioned that, right? Like we just announced today, right, that Bedrock Agents supports MCP servers now with inline agent capabilities. So pretty exciting stuff. It's fast, moving fast.
So if you want to spend 30 seconds on that auto approve, right? So what is everything? What are all those fields there?
Yeah, so the auto approve, so whenever it makes use of a tool, it does certain API calls via the MCP server. In the case of your client here, my case is client, it will say, hey, if it's something that could be, like, let's say it wants to run a local command on your machine, right? Like rm-rf, right? And delete something. You probably don't want that to be auto approved, right? So you have the option with some of these capabilities to either auto approve or require a human in the loop to manually approve or reject, some actions that the agent can take for you, but with use of MCP servers. And so these auto approve ones are just ones that I've auto approved. So that way I don't have to approve it every time.
So they're safe to use probably, and that's why we're putting in auto approve. And then anything we don't put it, we'll get prompted to say, hey, do you want to approve this request to be processed by the MCP server?
That's right. Yep. Yeah. And just some other ones here, some GitHub stuff here, and then going down, then that's it. So I just have a number of different MCP servers here. I have one for time, for managing, like allowing the server to understand, or allowing my AI to understand time in real terms and not just not hallucinating. Just a little time server, just different MCP capabilities here. I have one for Blender. So I have the ability to do natural language to 3D model, which is really, really, really cool. So, I mean, that's amazing, right? Like, I have it disabled at the moment for this demo because I want to show some stuff with Amazon services. And then I have this one too for file systems. So this MCP server allows the AI Claude, in this case, to access my local file system on my MacBook. To run different commands, which is super awesome. And so, just to kind of walk you through a little bit here, here's some, by the way, there's marketplace MCP servers, and you can create your own MCP servers. This is just some examples of public MCP servers you can connect to. All sorts of different capabilities, like opening a web browser, Blender, Dolly, like all these different things, different graph databases, Wolfram Alpha, all these different things, such an amazing list of different tools. And this is not even exhaustive at all. But, one of the tools here is one by AWS, and this is the knowledge base one. So I'm going to go ahead and find that really quick. And it is down here.
Oh, I saw Quadrant. That's a nice partner I've worked with before. Here we go. Now, oh, cool. It's in the marketplace already.
Yeah, so we have this one right here, an AWS knowledge base, which is really awesome. And this allows me to connect to my knowledge base here. So really cool stuff there. And then you can have your custom ones. So if I scroll up here.
So one example while you're pulling this up, right, is the time MCP server comes a great example here, right? Because I was working with a customer on an RFP use case where they're trying to say, hey, how old is this company, right? So, and then this document was created some time back. But if we had a time MCP server, we would know what is the current time and then really be able to do this, augment that with a RAG and say, hey, this is how old it is, right? Because all these documents could be outdated. But if we are able to augment the information with the MCP servers, I think that will be cool.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think this just goes back to like kind of good practices and how we think about AI, right? Like large language models, they could be PhD level intelligence, but it's like having a new employee coming into your team. They're not going to know how to do their job yet. You need to give them RAG, like the employee handbook. Maybe you need to give them access to different tools, MCP servers, to access different data they need to do their job. That's the way I think of it. And like time is just one of those things that, LLMs need, right? Like you and I have our phones and our watches to tell time. We got to give the AI a time capability too. So we could go ahead and get into prompting here.
Yeah, let's prompt it. That's what I was saying. But let's prompt this bad boy. I want to see it because I'm gonna have a million questions after I see this prompt. I know it.
So I'm gonna be using Claude 3.7 Sonnet here. I love this model, available in Amazon Bedrock. And I'm gonna go and ask, where is the closest Starbucks to Amazon's HQ? So this is like just a simple one. This will use the Amazon location services. And you can see here what's happening is that there's an API request. Claude is thinking. And then it's going to, as you can see, it's going to make use of a tool on the AWS location MCP server. And you can see there's that auto approve. And you can see, okay, here's the arguments. Here's the query, Amazon headquarters, Seattle. And then here's all the, kind of API responses that it's getting back. But the great thing is I didn't have to write a custom tool for this, right? Like this is just part of this MCP client server architecture.
Yeah, I mean, did you even really have to prompt engineer it, or like was the model just kind of able to figure out, oh, this has access to location data, therefore, like I'll pull this data and then rewrite, yeah. Does this eliminate a lot of the prompt engineering overhead? I guess
I would say no. I still think it's important to do prompt engineering because I found that especially when you have a lot of similar MCP servers, or maybe you have a lot of MCP servers, you kind of want to still steer the model like, hey, maybe you use this one in this case and this one in this case. I think that prompt engineering is still super, super important to help the model. But the model can still definitely, I've done it without any system prompt, and it can still make use of the MCP servers without any prompt engineering.
I see. Yeah, but best practice, you want to let it know, like, hey, here's the data you have access to, so it can get a sense of that. Makes sense.
Yeah, just to walk through again, what just happened here?
Yeah, that's so cool. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so just what happened here? You can see I gave it a task, and you can see the context one here. As it thought about it, Claude 3.7 is a thinking reasoning model, which is exciting, available on Bedrock. And you can see client, which again is that MCP client that I have. You could create your own MCP client. There's other MCP clients out there like Cursor and others that you could use. But the client was able to, with the LLM, is able to figure out, okay, let me look through my MCP config file here. I know he's asking about, because it's natural language, right? I know he's asking about Amazon HQ. Okay, where's the HQ at? I know I need to find the location of that. So I figured, I'll use the AWS location service for that, use that MCP server. That MCP server has tools and capabilities that allows it to get access to that information. And then it continues to go through its reasoning and getting more information. Here's the latitude and longitude of Starbucks. It's looking at the distance, getting all that information, that rich information from the Amazon location services. And then one of the other steps here is that it does have access to open up a web browser. This is just an MCP server capability that I have as well. It can open up the web browser and find, okay, here's where it's at. And then it gives me the final result here. The closest Starbucks to Amazon HQ is literally right next door at 442 Terry Avenue, Seattle, Washington. And
one thing that's missing here is ordering the coffee directly and then delivering it. So,
right, so we're not far from that, right? We're definitely not far from that. And
I mean, if Starbucks has an API, it should be technically possible, right?
Yeah, why not?
To then flow this into like a request to order a coffee on DoorDash or wherever.
Well, Trevor, they just need an MCP server.
Yeah, that's right. The Starbucks MCP server. No, that's brilliant, actually.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask a more complicated question where we're going to use multiple MCP servers. So I'm going to say, so in my data set, I didn't kind of go over this. In my data set, in my Graph RAG Amazon Bedrock knowledge database, I have a bunch of historical Russian tweets. Just some trolling tweets. Why Russian? Just because I just found the data set interesting, and so it's in there. And so I'm going to say, can you tell me what the sentiment is of the Russian Twitter data, and what location or region was the most common in the data set?
It looks like we're asking a couple of questions here, right? So sentiment, we're asking the location or the region, and we're also saying most common entries in the data set, right? So it's like doing a few things here.
Super complicated. I mean, imagine, I just ask, anybody that has built agentic workflows or, without MCP. I mean, that building these agents without MCP, without this standardized protocol, and having to oh man, okay, now I gotta figure out, okay, how do I work with this database? How do I work with, this API and that API and, this type of data? What a pain, right? And so this is what I love about MCP. I can ask a complicated question, and just imagine this client here is my agentic, enterprise application, right? I don't have to come up with any complicated tool use or complicated anything other than just my MCP client configuration and my credentials to access those data sources. And here we go. So now, it says, I'll help you analyze the Russian Twitter data. Let me dig into both the sentiment and location for you. And so it's now using my knowledge base. And so it is asking, what is the sentiment of Russian tweets? And we can see that's getting the information from the Graph RAG knowledge base that I have using Neptune Analytics. We can see it continues to pull that up. And now it's continuing to query the knowledge base. And we'll see it use the Amazon location service. Actually, I think it did already. Let's go back up here. Oh, no, it has not yet. Okay. So it continues to think through the process here. So it's asking me to approve this. Let's see what's it asking me to approve. So I am going to auto approve this to analyze the tweet metrics. So next time I won't have to manually approve that. And now it's analyzing the tweets themselves.
So in this case, you were able to get hold of some sample Twitter data out there.
Yeah, and I also have some Russian data in my DynamoDB table as well. So now it's looking at the DynamoDB MCP server. So it's using another MCP server here.
Oh wow! So did it just knew the context that that data, that type of data is in.
Yeah, we can. Sources. Yeah, we can look and see. What did it think here? Well, this is a lot, but basically, it's reasoning that it needs to look at this MCP server, this data source.
Wow.
Right. It's looking at it's just reasoning through it. There are different account categories like non-English, fearmonger. To get a clearer picture of which region is most common, I should try a query specifically for region distribution. And to understand the sentiment, I should look at the account types. Let me query for more specific information about regions and sentiment. So now it wants to use another MCP server to try to get a more accurate answer. It looks like I had an error here, but it tried again. And let's see, it looks like it was successful the second time. That can happen. And so it continues on here. Whoa.
So this is for the machines to read now at this point, right?
That's right. Yeah, we're just pulling raw embeddings now or something.
Yeah, I'll retry that real quick. That's interesting that I can't.
So, and again, right? So, do we need to have these highly reasoning models available to be able to invoke? Maybe not, right? So again, it's just for us to be able to understand how things work. But again, you can work with even the smaller models too.
So you're asking if we need the reasoning models? It definitely helps. By the way, the reason why I started a new task is because I'm not sure why that failed. It's been successful multiple times, but I just wanted to move on. And now I'm listing the contents of my DynamoDB.
Nice.
What was I going to say? So the reasoning models are definitely more accurate. Like a lot of research is showing that reasoning models, you get a huge increase because you have test time compute, right? Like, if you think about what a large language model is, right? Tokens, next token prediction. And when you do reasoning, right, it's outputting more tokens. And so it's increasing the accuracy of its output to you. And so reasoning makes a big difference. It's going pretty fast here. Now it's using the Amazon location server. I may have asked too big of a question here for Klein. Again, I'm just using the Klein MCP client raw here, but you can see like the power. It's looking up the map, the Esri map in the Amazon location services here. And this might be too big for Klein itself. Yeah, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with MCP's limitation. This is just Klein itself, kind of.
No, I think it's still a good, like an effective way to showcase like what it's capable of. So somebody asked, maybe you can speak to this. Like, there's two questions tied up in this from one of our audience members. I want to dig into. Like, one, like the second half of the question, it says, "Can I just say store data in DynamoDB?" That makes me what that made me think is like, can I write data with an MCP server, or is it read only for now? And then they're asking as a follow-up, maybe how you built your Dynamo MCP server, because it sounds like that's something other folks would like to try out.
Yeah, two great questions. So the first question was, can you have an MCP client, your agent, use an MCP server like the one I have here to create? Yes, you can. I specifically did not. I still like Amazon CDK code for infrastructure as code to provision those databases, right? And then use an MCP server to read, write, and access within the database table, for example. You could give your full-blown permissions to an MCP server to do everything you could do with CDK potentially, right? Because it's just, I would just caution giving too much power to an AI, just willy-nilly. I would test things first to kind of iterate through that. What do you need? What does your application actually need? Usually when you create a database, you would probably just create that once or, and then add data to it. And so maybe you just create that with CDK or do it manually, and then have MCP manage that data in that database. But you could have MCP with an LLM do that as well. And then the second question of, how did I get my data into DynamoDB? So I actually had a CSV, comma separated file, comma delimited file of all this Twitter data. And I uploaded it to an S3 bucket, and DynamoDB has a feature to import off a CSV. Yeah, and so I was just able to import, and a few minutes later, I had a huge table in DynamoDB to query.
But could you add a new record to the table via MCP? Is there some way, maybe not in your demo, but within what's possible in MCP, to instruct the agent to write to the table instead of read from the table?
Yeah, I don't remember if I gave it that functionality. We can try it really quick.
Let's try it. Hey, I love a Hail Mary demo at the end. We haven't tried this one, folks. Let's see if we can do it. This will be how we close this out today. Hopefully with a successful demo writing to DynamoDB.
So I just asked, can you add a single record to my DynamoDB and walk me through what you need? So let's see what happens here.
So that's another capability as well, right? So read permissions, write permissions. That's another capability that you're adding, and looks like. So it read
my DynamoDB, and it said, based on examining the table, I now understand what is needed to add a record. At a minimum, we need the following. So I'm going to say, hey, can you, now that you understand what is needed, oops, please add a single synthetic record, very small, to test the functionality.
Doesn't work.
You can make up whatever
We need an AI drum roll.
you want. Ready? Here we go.
Claude, please think through a virtual drum roll right now, please. Okay, so it's creating the put tweet.
So I'm gonna go ahead and prove it there. Let's see what happens.
Saved.
Uh-oh. The key element doesn't match. And now it's gonna reason through, okay, what else do I need?
But it tried, right? If you got that error, that means that it oh wait, no, it tried again. It says it thinks it was successful.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and just test it out if it was successful really fast here. So let's see. So it created a record with the following data. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a new session and say, hey, can you find this in my dynamo?
All right. We're gonna see if it was a success. We did it just for you. Create the imaginable. We did it just for you, closing us out on an ad hoc. Can we write to Dynamo demo? Let's see if it was a success. If it was, there's no prize, but it's pretty cool that it worked.
So we showed, we showed the power of using MCPs in this demo, but we have more coming up, right? So we have more shows lined up on how to create MCP servers on using Bedrock and also using agents, right? So we've yet to broadcast those episodes, but more to find out soon.
Yeah. I guess that's a great way to wrap us up here. Where should people like that want to learn more about MCP? What should they do? They should definitely follow Adam on LinkedIn. Follow Swami on LinkedIn. That's where I learn everything is on LinkedIn about MCP right now. But
yeah, well,
there's a great repo. I'll drop the repo in the chat for folks too. I think that's a great one for folks to keep an eye out.
I'll pull up something here in just a second, but just really fast. I know we got to go here, but you can see that Claude was successful using the MCP server to find it. You can see it found the test user, it found the content, just testing the AWS DynamoDB MCP server, and it was able to find the synthetic data in the database. So it worked. So it was able to add data to the database. Pretty awesome. So you imagine, just really quick, imagine this in your organization. You have a workflow where you have a lot of data coming in, and you want to ingest that into your data. You can have an AI filter through that, perhaps, and automatically add that to your database or data source. But yeah, I'll go to the resources here really quick. So this is just some resources. There's so many MCP resources out there, but these are just a few here that you can check out. There's the official MCP docs. Definitely recommend going there. There's also some new content from AWS where we talk about Amazon Bedrock agents with MCP servers, which is exciting. MCP server for code assistance, which is also exciting.
Very exciting stuff. There's so much goodness coming out in the MCP world. And Adam, I cannot say thank you enough. Adam, I didn't tell folks. Sorry, Adam's a longtime friend of mine. We worked together at an old company years ago, and somehow our careers got to cross paths again in the last couple of years. So Adam, thanks so much, man. It's been a pleasure having you on the stream, telling us all about MCP.
That's awesome.
Remember, E equals MC squared or E equals MCP?
MCP.
MCP.
That's right. E equals MCP. Folks, that's all we got for today. We got to close this thing down and head on into our nights. But thanks so much for the engagement in the chat. E equals MCP. People are already picking up on it. I think that's it, folks. I guess it's time to say goodbye.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody.
Bye, everybody.
See ya, folks.